Good evening and good morning to all of our participants, and thank you so much for joining us today for the discussion on enhancing US and China climate action on zero emissions vehicles. I'm Jen Perrin with the California China Climate Institute and will be serving as the moderator for today's discussion. Before we begin, I'd like to offer a few brief housekeeping remarks to get us started. So we are recording this event. It will later be available on the California China Climate Institute website, ccci.berkeley.edu, and also our YouTube channel. This event is being simultaneously translated into Mandarin Chinese. So you are welcome to click on the globe icon at the base of your screen and select the language that you would like to listen in, either English or Mandarin. Throughout today's discussion, if you would like to ask a question for any of our panelists, you are welcome to enter that in the Q&A field, also found at the base of your screen. We'll do as best as we can to answer as many questions live as we are able. So to go ahead and get started, today's program is one of a broader series that we have been conducting here at the California China Climate Institute, focused on opportunities this decade for the US and China to accelerate climate action. So we took a look at some of the topics under the US-China Glasgow Declaration, and have a set of paper series related to that and a set of correlated events. And this is one of those, really focused in on zero emissions vehicles in particular. So to start us off, I have the pleasure to introduce our first presenter and a core collaborator on this project, Julie Zhang, the China Projects Manager of Energy Innovation. Before Energy Innovation, Julie was a postdoc at the Institute of Transportation Studies at the University of California, Davis. She has conducted research on electric and diesel buses in Shenzhen, on environmental justice issues related to freight transportation, and on road transportation, energy, and greenhouse gas emissions projections in China, among other transportation-related topics. So we're delighted to have you with us today, and I'll turn it over to you to offer some opening remarks. Julie, please go ahead.
Thank you, Jean. Can you see my slides well?
Yes.
Great. Okay, good morning, good evening, dear guests, colleagues, and friends. Thank you very much for joining us with this webinar. My name is Julie Zhang. I'm the China Project Manager at Energy Innovation, and I'm honored to welcome you to this webinar. Before we delve into today's topic, as Jane have already introduced, I would like to echo what she has said and highlight the significance of the 11 papers. We do think that the collaboration between US and China are great. There are great potential there, and we hope that the collaboration will bring more understanding and help each other kind. And you can find the papers and webinars there, and we welcome any feedback, suggestions. So on to our main topic, ZEVs. China and California are pioneers in ZEV developments, both for the market development and also for the policy developments. The frequent discussion between the Chinese and California governments and experts have led to the establishment of policies that promotes ZEV developments. As the figure on the right show, China has made remarkable progress in the past decade, achieving a ZEV penetration rate of 25.6% in vehicle sales in 2022, surpassing the 2025 target of 20%. The penetration rate reached 28% for passenger vehicles and 10% for commercial vehicles. The figure on the left demonstrates the ZEV exports also drove up the automobile exportation in China. marking a 100% increase in ZEVs exports and 50% increase of vehicle exportation last year. In the US, there are also more incentives and supporting policies being launched recently. The Inflation Reduction Act provides further tax credits to ZEV customers, and the federal government has made significant investments in charging infrastructure developments. California's new Advanced Clean Fleet Rule approved last week mandates that trucking goes electric over the next 20 years, making it the most ambitious such mandate in the country and also in the world. We are thrilled to see this race to the top between jurisdictions and witnessing more ZEV penetration in both countries. However, the high spread adoption of ZEVs still poses challenges. For example, for several vehicle types, especially trucks, the upfront cost and also kind of heavy passenger vehicles, the upfront cost is still very high comparing to traditional vehicles, which is a hurdle for large-scale adoption. And there are limited models available, and the supply is not as much as we expected. And the standards for like battery swap trucks are not available. These are all barriers for large-scale penetration. Additionally, the infrastructure to support ZEVs, such as charging stations or battery swap stations, is not yet as widely available as it needs to be. The interaction of vehicles to grid system is limited in both knowledge and application. So all these lists are actually collaboration potentials. Both US and China face these common challenges, and communication and cooperation are crucial in finding solutions and racing towards a high percentage ZEV future. In this meeting, we will discuss the development progresses and policy insights in the United States and China, and explore potential solutions and opportunities for collaboration. I'm excited to hear from our panel and engage in a productive discussion on this vital topic. Let's work together to explore the opportunities and challenges of ZEV adoption and find ways to promote their widespread use. My presentation concludes here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Julie, for setting that stage for us and helping set the context. So next, we are going to hear from Gil Tall, who is the director of the Electric Vehicle Research Center at the University of California, Davis. His work really focuses on travel behavior and the implementation of travel behavior-related policies. And he has led projects on the needs for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, travel behavior, and demand for electric vehicles, among other transportation-related topics. So Gil is going to dive into some of the opportunities that he sees here in the United States. Over to you, Gil.
Thank you, and great to be here, and good morning, good evening. I hope that you can see the right set of slides. Yeah. Okay, but I'm not on slide 1. So I will do a quick review of the US market, and then we can discuss the opportunities. Things are changing fast, and it's great times to be in this business of electric transportation when every day there are new things. Not that great for academic researchers who need to write papers and things are changing, but great for all of us. And I will focus mostly on light-duty vehicles today, even so important changes are happening to heavy-duty and transit and so on. So as you may well know, the demand is being pushed by regulation. And California, as the leader with ACC2 regulation, Advanced Clean Car 2, or the ZEV mandate, is pushing the market up. It's not just California, it's more than a dozen states that follow in California and looking for a market share of about 2/3 in 2030 and about 100% in 2035. California is looking at about 80% BEVs and up to 20% plug-in hybrid in the mix, even at 2035. When we're looking on the impact of California, it's this state that are in dark blue that are following California. They're what we call the Section 177 states. They will be at about, in less than 10 years from now, about 2/3 of the cells, 60% plus will be electric. Some other states, because they are not part of this Section 177, will be way behind based on ACC2. But recent days, we have new announcement. The federal government, the EPA, is trying to push also for electrification. The way the EPA is doing it is by changing the regulation on CO2 in numbers of gram per mile. So as you can see on this table, on the left side, this is the current regulation. It's about 200 gram per mile today, going down to 171 in 2026. What the EPA is suggesting is that in 2026, it will be 150 gram per mile. And in 2032, it will be 73 gram per mile. That will be the average of the fleet, average of a company need to be at this number. What does it mean? Today, if you look at a very efficient car like Toyota Prius, is about 160 grams per mile, 158. It means that starting at 2026, in order to get to these numbers, they will have to incorporate a lot of electric cars. Electric cars for these regulations are at 0 gram per mile because we're only talking about tailpipe. So a mix of gas cars and electric cars will be the only way for a car company to meet the new goals. Plug-in hybrids will also play a big role. So for example, Toyota RAV4 Prime, a big car, but a plug-in hybrid, is doing 72 grams per mile. Another example is the Jeep Wrangler, much lower range today, it's 230 grams per mile. It won't be as efficient for the new regulation. So we were trying to figure out what does it mean to electric cars. So 2032, we believe that with a large mix of plug-in hybrid, 2/3 of the new cars in the US will have to be electrified or to have a plug. So the number I showed to before were for the ACC2 only. But if we add to it the EPA regulation, if they will be actually adopted, a big question mark there, we may see much larger market share for electric cars with around close to 100% in most of the states that follow California, and close to 50% the rest of the nations. We are talking about 12 million light-duty vehicles per year in before even 2035. What does it mean for infrastructure? I can say clearly, I want to start with that. The huge investment we see today are actually putting us on track to meet the demand, the growing demand in the next couple of years. The long run is where the uncertainty and the opportunities are still open. Charging infrastructure today is for people who have one electric car and 1 or 2 or 3 other vehicles in the household that are still gas cars. But we see more and more households that buy only electric, 2 electric vehicles, 3 electric vehicle households. We see more households that buy used electric vehicles. And we see more households who buy, who have more cars and cannot charge at home. Renters, people live in apartments and so on. And this is changing fast and will change dramatically in the next couple of years. The largest growing market in California is the repeat buyers. And these are just photos I was taking on my 1.2 mile bike commute from home to the office, 3 random houses in Davis, California. But this is not the US. This is not all of California. To get close to 100, we also need to electrify these guys. That's rural US, that's rural California. The desert person who have no electricity, the vacation house, the guy who show up or the family who show up only on the weekends, but they need a charger because they will be there most of the weekends. And the farmhouse or the farm, very, very different use cases that we are still need to electrify, and we are in very early phases. Now we need to remember that in the US, we have thousands of electric utilities, not always working together. I pick this example. These are rural utilities, and each one of these funny shapes is a different utility, and all of these holes are some other company that are managing this region. So a lot of opportunities, a lot of challenges in the charging investment and how to fix this topic. Just as an example, charging reliability. We still have low reliability, and the main goal here is to move from chargers that are there and you need to check to charger that are dependable, that you can jump into your car and go anywhere you want anytime. It's not just about technology. Who is plowing these chargers? Is it the state plowing it? It is the charger owner plow these chargers? Who is responsible to move the snow so I can drive my car all the way to the charger? And the problem is even bigger because we still struggle with the business case, how to make money on infrastructure. We will have a big public investment. That's the right way to start. But how we make sure that these chargers are actually a valid business for the owners of these chargers? There are many different ways to do it. Combine it with retail around it, selling all kind of memberships options, helping with other amenities. But the business case is not the private sector problem. The business case is an important discussion on the way to reliable and dependable infrastructure. So we have great investments from the state of California, from the federal government, from utilities, from private companies. And we are kind of covered for the next couple of years, but we need to solve all the rest to get to where we need to be. My last part of the presentation will talk a little bit about supply, and I will keep it open after that. So we did a big model. We have all the data in the world about who buy electric car. We have all the data in the world about trade, and then about the flow and the production, and we try to combine it together. I will just show North America. So what you can see here on the left side, and let's see if I can have a laser pointer, is cars imported into North America, light-duty vehicles. This is production in North America, and this is the North America market. So cars are being made in the US, sold in the US, or sent to Europe and so on. This is light-duty internal combustion engine. We don't have China here. This is electric vehicle 2021. So you can see that China is showing up here as car from China import a little bit into the US, and a lot of cars from the US are going to China. About 207,000 cars were going to China. Moving to, come on, now when I have that. Moving to 2035, I would like just to show as my last slide, two scenarios. The left one is high domestic supply. So all the countries are trying to make everything in-house. No one is playing nicely with each other, only USMCA. You can see that in this case, the 10 million cars that will be sold in the US, 6.6 will come from the US, the rest from Mexico and Canada. Very few cars will come from the rest of the world. But if we will be able to open to global free trade, then we will see many more cars coming to the US from around the world. And the US will also export many more cars to around the world. These scenarios are just starting point for a great discussion on how to optimize the cost of EVs by getting global free trade. And I will stop here and thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we're going to turn to some examples from China. So Hui He is the China Regional Director of the International Council of Clean Transportation. And her roles have included developing and implementing China's strategies and matching work plans related to transportation, including on vehicle criteria and greenhouse gas emissions reductions, among other topics. And her area of expertise include efficiency and emissions regulations for both light duty and heavy duty vehicles and vehicle electrification policies in China. So please, over to you.
Great, thanks for organizing this fantastic webinar series. And it's my great pleasure to be part of the team to draft these Sino-US collaboration memos focusing on developing zero-emission vehicles. And today I'm happy to share some perspective from our side on China's EV or ZEV development and opportunities. But first, let me give you a brief overview of the key recent major ZEV policies and targets. There are many, just recently, so I list them in a simple timeline on the top, and in the second row, I give more details, and at the bottom, I use a simple chart to summarize the key target and vehicle categories covered in each policy. But not all of these policies or targets were mandatory. Some are voluntary. For example, this green card, this industry roadmap 2.0, targeting at 50% new energy vehicle penetration by 2035. This is proposed by the industry and therefore is not binding. But others are more imperative, such as China's NEV industry development plan established by the Ministry of Industry, setting a target of only 20%, unfortunately, for 2025. And this one, looking at this one in yellow card, looking at 40% clean energy vehicles by 2030. And this is established in China's recent national carbon peaking plan. For the midterm, in the 2030 timeframe, the most ambitious and powerful EV policy and target is the one established by Ministry of the Environment. It's called China Carbon and Pollution Co-Control and Co-Benefit Action Plan, which requires key regions to deploy at least 50% of new energy vehicles by 2030, and that roughly translates into 40% nationwide. And this affects both cars and heavy-duty vehicles. As you can see, China does not really have the reputation to establish long-term ambitious ZEV targets. However, these nearer-term targets and plans did play a vital role in driving the rapid EV development over the past decade. So in the next few slides, I'm going to portrait 9 key trends of ZEV development and opportunities in China. So trend number 1, China emerges as the world's largest ZEV producer market, and also EV battery producer, and its export of ZEVs is also rising. So this chart shows the historical trend of the share of Chinese ZEV registration or production or EV battery production or export in the global market. So as of today, but actually as of 2021, our data is a little outdated. China roughly, this jumps automatically. I have to control it. China represents roughly half of the world's ZEV registration production and also EV battery production. And the ZEV export share is also rising to about 7% in 2020. The majority of China's ZEV vehicle sales were dominated by passenger cars. So this chart shows the historical annual sales of ZEVs by major vehicle category in China. So as we can see, as of 2021, over 90% of the EVs sold in China were passenger cars, followed by these bus and coaches, the orange bar, and then the light trucks. These are mainly urban logistics vehicles, logistics vans. And then on the top, there's a very slim green bar just emerging after 2018. These are electric medium heavy-duty trucks. The categories represents the lion's share of both the climate and also air pollutants emissions. But the electrification process is only beginning. So this means basically the future investment resources and policies needs to focus really on these vehicle categories. Trend number 3, within the passenger car market, the mini car segment has already been fully electrified. So we are showing, again, the historical market trend by car segment. A00, the mini car, is already 100%. Actually, a few years ago, it's already approaching 100%. And then these mainstream car segments, A, small cars, B, lower medium segment, and SUV, are also seeing a rapid rise in their market share in the electric car market. It is worth noticing that today SUVs, electric SUVs, are nearly half of the electric car market in China. Trend number 4, policies have been effective in driving EV technology advancement. So now we're not only looking at the sales volume, but also the utility and technical parameters, performance of these ZEVs. So over the past decade, all the major EV policies in China, including the central subsidy to EV purchases, and also the ZEV mandate policy, also known as the dual credit policy in China, they all set some kind of criteria or requirements on vehicle technical parameters, such as electric range, battery energy density, or electric energy consumption or efficiency. For example, the size of the central subsidy was indexed to electric range and also energy consumption. As a result, these key utility parameters of ZEVs have been improving in the past few years. For example, the full electric range of typical passenger cars has nearly doubled since 2012. Similarly, battery energy density in terms of watt per kilogram, battery capacity in terms of kilowatt hour, both increased by nearly 60% in the past few years. And energy consumption, electricity consumption of ZEVs decreased or improved by more than 10% in the past few years. So these are great. However, these values only remain in paper. They're nominal, which means these values are certified. They are measured in laboratory driving conditions. In the real world driving conditions, however, the real world electric energy efficiency performance of cars shown on this chart still needs to improve. So in this ICCT study, we were analyzing 10 leading electric car brands or models. These include both Chinese brands and also international leading brands, and also covering a wide range of vehicle segment from compact to SUVs. So these data points were surveyed from 5 representative cities shown at the bottom. These are Beijing, Chengdu, Guangzhou, Hangzhou, and Shenyang. These cities were representative in terms of either driving conditions or climate conditions. For example, Shenyang is in north part of China, so it encounters severe winter, winter time. Also, Chengdu and Guangzhou are very hot and humid climate, etc. So each dot on this chart shows the actual real-world driving energy consumption in terms of kilowatt hour per 100 kilometer of these vehicle models in these cities. These are big data analysis. So each model we have probably thousands or even more data points. As we can see in certain extreme real-world driving conditions, for example, very cold light blue dots and cold darker blue dots of car 8 and car 9, their actual energy consumption can double their nominal values. Their nominal values are denoted by these yellow dashed bars. So also similarly in other difficult driving conditions, for example, high speed, these are like above 90 kilometer per hour, or in other like difficult driving conditions, the actual energy consumption also increased dramatically. Higher actual energy consumption means greater life cycle emissions for these EVs, which basically undermines our goal to use electric vehicles to reduce emissions, right? So in the future, this needs to be a focus of technology advancement and also policy development in China. Trend number 5, ZEV development is gathering traction in smaller cities. Here we're showing the ZEV shares by city classes in China. In China, we typically divide cities into 5 or 6 tiers or groups by their socio-economic status. For example, the tier 1 cities, these are the huge mega cities. There are only 4 tier 1 cities in China: Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou, as you are familiar with. And then the new tier 1 cities are also very large cities in population, but they are mainly the capital cities of provinces or major industry cities. And tier 2 cities are medium to large size of city, and tier 3 to 5 were smaller cities. They are less developed. Many are located in the western, less developed part of China, and even township level cities. So we're showing 2 years of data of the share of ZEV sales by these city classes. As we can see, the smaller cities, tiers 3 to 5, represent much bigger share of ZEV sales in 2021 compared with 2015. As of today, these smaller cities represent 1/3 of the national market, and this certainly needs to be a focus for China to develop its EVs in the future. Trend number 6, for each of the city classes, we identify top runners in terms of EV development. So these are the emerging EV leading cities in different city classes. We're showing again the 6 city class, the groups on the very left-hand side. And then the first column on the left identifies the leading EV cities and their absolute EV sales volume, shown as the green bar, and the market penetration of ZEVs, shown as the red dots. As we can see that in some tier 3 and tier 4 cities, the market penetration of ZEVs can approach nearly 50%, which is much higher than even the bigger and wealthier cities. And on the right-hand side, I basically lay out a lot of geographical and demographical socioeconomic indicators for you to get a sense of each city class's status. So basically, this demonstrates all the cities, big or small, wealthy or less developed, all have their unique pathways to develop EVs. And this paves the way for China to even expand its EV development beyond these big and wealthy cities. Well, the last chart basically shows the market profile for electric cars. The story for commercial vehicles is slightly different. So basically, trend number 7, we found that air quality policies were the primary driver of the market for heavy-duty ZEVs. in China. On the left-hand side, I'm using a ZEV distribution map, but for only two vehicle categories. These are the heaviest truck categories. These are heavy dump trucks and tractor trucks. This map looks very differently from the typical EV distribution map you might have seen, where EVs were concentrated in a number of southern provinces, especially here in Guangdong province, in Shenzhen city, or in the big cities along the coast. But this chart shows very differently. All the ZEV dump trucks and tractor trucks nearly all concentrated in one province, Hebei province, and slightly around Hebei province. So this is a province known of its heavy industry, especially the steel industry. It's heavily polluted, so the region was facing very strict environmental requirements. For example, during certain pollution category days, on like orange pollution days, they are categorized into colors. The orange means severe pollution. Only China 6 compliance cars or ZEVs can be used in this industry, such as in the steel industry. So these policies actually play a vital role in driving the local market. On the right-hand side, again, I'm showing the top runners in terms of EV development of these two categories, dump trucks and tractor trucks. Again, you can see cities like Tangshan, Handan, Shijiazhuang, Zhengzhou, these heavily polluted, air-polluted cities were actually leading in deploying these heavy-duty ZEVs. Trend number 8, China builds the world's largest public EV charging network. Here we're showing a historical trend of public EV chargers in major markets in the United States, in Europe, and in China, and also by category, fast and slow chargers. China currently deployed more than 55% of world's total public EV charger. But however, we found that battery swapping might be a more promising charging solution for heavy commercial vehicles, especially for heavy trucks. So trend number 9 is that in recent years, the swappable zero-emission heavy-duty vehicle models is growing rapidly. By swappable, I mean that this vehicle model can be charged and it can be battery swapped. So on this chart, on the left-hand side, the yellow bar shows the share of swappable ZEV HDVs in 2021. But the number changed dramatically in the last year, in 2022, when nearly all new zero-emission truck models are swappable. Now I come to my quick summary and recommendations. Even though China set relatively modest long-term goals or little long-term goals for ZEVs, the current plans and goals have contributed to substantial increase in EV markets over the past decade. That being said, to really align with China's decarbonization objectives, more aggressive long-term ZEV targets would be required. In our other study, not shown in this slide deck, we estimate to keep on track to the long-term 2050-2060 decarbonization target, China will need 100% ZEVs for passenger cars and above 50% ZEV trucks by 2035. Then we're seeing a trend of cities playing an increasingly important role in electrification, especially the smaller, less developed Western and Northern cities could be a focus of policies in the following decade. We recommend China to adopt a combination of policies, really a policy portfolio to drive electrification, not dependent on one single like ZEV mandate or things like that. What China really needs, especially for heavy-duty vehicles, includes robust vehicle efficiency or emissions or direct CO2 emission regulations. These regulations are managed by the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Industry. And then China also needs strong city or subnational fleet level requirements. These are mainly tied to air quality improvement requirements in regions, and these are established by the Ministry of Environment. And then ZEV credit or sales mandate managed by the Ministry of Industry, and then road access policies and incentives by the Ministry of Transport. We also want to pay attention to the real-world performance efficiency of these ZEVs because of China's relatively dirty grids right now. So we recommend China to adopt energy efficiency standards or equivalent policies for ZEVs to improve real-world electric efficiency and therefore effectively reducing life cycle emissions. And last but not least, China still needs to accelerate the build out of charging infrastructure and solutions to meet its EV growth targets. So that's my sharing for today. I welcome your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And by way of reminder for our audience, we are going to soon turn to interactive question and answers. So we welcome you to enter any questions that you have within the Q&A box at the base of your screen, and we'll turn to that very soon. But first, I want to turn to Yunqi Wang, who is the director of the China Center for Energy and Transportation at the University of California, Davis Institute of Transportation Studies. He is an issue expert on these issues and is the co-director of the China-US ZEV Policy Lab, a partnership between UC Davis and CATARC, the administrative body that oversees and regulates many of the activities of the audio industry in China. So over to you, Yunqi, for some closing reflections before we turn to audience question and answer.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. I commend you and Wei for their very great presentation and comprehensive, very indeed. So let me do some conclusions. How to move. Okay, so as you can see that this is the top 30 largest light vehicle market by the world in 2021. I have to move this. Okay, so 2022, China's new energy vehicle sales were about 6.5 million units. And BYD in 2022 had about 1.4 million, and Tesla estimate for about 1.2 million, I think a little bit less than 1.2 million. So both of them are, if they were country, the market were about 11th or 12th largest market in the world. China's ZEV market alone was number 2 in the world as an auto market. So this is very substantial. And this is the smaller sized Wuling microcars, which was ranked 22-23 would be the market. You can look at the Tesla sales. Tesla was the number 1 seller in the United States, number 3 in China, and number 6 in the European EU market. However, Tesla is only number 2 in the world. The only reason is that the Chinese market, A is the largest, B, the Chinese government has adopted a comprehensive policy and targets for ZEV adoptions, whereas in the United States, the market is unstable. You have one government which is strongly in favor of ZEV adoption, and the other government, turned everything around. So it's not a very good market for automakers. And this is BYD's chairman. So we projected the EV adoption in 2019, just before the COVID. Now we found, at that time, I thought we were very ambitious. But now we look at it, we found that we are very conservative at the time. So at that time, we project by 2025, only 25 or 26% market would be zero emission vehicles. But now we look at last year, it's already 25, 26%. So with this trend, we look at it, probably by 2025, we'll get about 50%, half of the market will be zero, new energy vehicles. So this is the gap between our new projections and our old projection. Now, this was the report that we produced together with Hui and Xiu Li and Dan. We produced last summer actually. So even then we were projected that by 2026, so we were following the California ZEV mandate trend. The Chinese market would be 39%. But actually, in our recent projection would be much higher. So it would be 45, 50%. So if we look at this trend, we probably by 2035 will reach something like 90 to 100% of ZEV market. I believe that, probably when we reach about 90%, there will be some slowing down. We'll have to think about other issues to move towards that direction. But it's getting closer, and that's California's target is by 2035 as well. The U.S. projections by 2030, it's government ideal is by 2030 to reach 50% of the market. And we know now, Gil just mentioned that the EPA has some new standards, CO2 regulations that probably will move this upper a little more. So here are my recommendations, that the recommendations we provided in our report, some of the summaries. To the United States, we think probably we need a national ZEV mandate or the adoption of the CO2 regulations for the whole country. And also, we need to reduce per capita vehicle use through other means, more using of the public transit and using smaller two-wheelers to get to where we want. And again, we need to adopt the CO2 emissions and improve the fuel economy performance standards. For China, we need to adopt the new energy vehicle sales mandate for commercial vehicles as early as possible. But this is just one of the measures, as Hui mentioned, that we need other policies to accommodate these new targets for heavy-duty trucks. And we need also to raise 2025 new energy vehicle market share target. Right now, it's around 20%. Which was reached last year. So we need to move this way beyond, probably 30, 35, even 40, which right now look very achievable. We need also to extend both ZEV mandates to 10 years or longer. Right now in China, it's only about 2 years to 20, now it's 20 to 2025, right? Another 2 years. So it does not provide a good signal for automakers in the long run. So we need to really have a 10-year or something like that for the longer ones. Another thing is we need to develop ambitious subnational ZEV targets following the Hainan provincial model, right? Hainan is leading China as a province that will reach 30% new energy vehicle sales. Actually, it's called clean energy vehicle sales by 2030. So there's some nuances in the interpretation of what this clean energy vehicles, but from my discussion with them, they are aiming really for most of the new energy vehicles, at least in the light duty vehicle side. And another thing is I would recommend that there will be a special multi-ministry group in China to take the leadership of the new policies, probably this new group should be coordinated by the Ministry of Ecology and Environment rather than the Ministry of Industry and IT, so that we're aiming for the carbon neutral target of 2016 or 60 or even before that, for the transportation sector to reach carbon neutral. So recommendations for both countries, I think we need to increase rather than reduce the exchange of policies and best practice. From what I can see is, especially in the heavy and medium duty trucks, California is adopting new policies and investing heavily in hydrogen stations and fast chargers at the moment, without considering the other opportunities, such as heavy-duty battery swaps. So what I'm concerned is that without understanding the emerging new technology or business model, we might have spent so much time and locked in ourselves in the old business models. So we need to really increase our exchange and understand the new practices that are emerging. And another thing is the United States should work with China in harmonizing hydrogen refueling standards, and both countries should open their markets for, at least for fuel cell electric vehicles. Obviously, I would prefer much more to further bring down the price of fuel cell stacks. From what I observe these days in China is the fuel cell stacks in China, the price of them are coming down rapidly. So there is good market. Fuel cell electric vehicle market in the US will be small and remain small, I believe. So I don't think it's very strategic. So it makes sense to have a huge global market for this area, especially in the long distance heavy duty truck area. So I really would encourage both countries to work together on fuel cells. In V2Gs, the two countries can share the best practice and lessons learned for mutual benefits. Both countries should work to develop an internationally harmonized and standardized carbon emissions accounting and evaluation system with a database for the transportation industry, because the boundaries, everything's are not exactly the same. So when we talk to each other about carbon peaking, carbon neutrality, we might misunderstand what does that mean behind it. So it makes sense to work together to set up some kind of standards. So these are all my recommendations. Thanks. And now I'm opening for questions for everyone.
Thank you, Yunxi, and to all of our panelists for your remarks. We are going to transition into our open audience question and answer portion of the discussion. So we welcome questions for any of our panelists today. We have quite a number coming in, so we're going to begin working through them. If you do have another question, please type it in the Q&A section at the base of your screen. So to begin, we have a question about the Inflation Reduction Act, which stimulates that batteries required for electric vehicles in the US must come from North America or other free trade partners. So I'm curious, Gil or others, how does this affect the development of electric vehicles in the United States?
Yeah, thanks. A great question. It have a long-term effect on the location of new facilities, but the cost difference is not big enough to totally change the market. So batteries will keep coming from all over the world to the US market, even with the IRA regulation. But in the long term, probably between closer to 2030, we will see more and more production in North America that does not exist today.
Okay, thank you for that. And at this stage of EV development, would the panelists say that the US EV regulatory framework is more command and control, whereas the Chinese one is more market oriented, or would you characterize it in a different way? And related, how would you, so given strong industrial development, would one argue that market forces would further the expansion of ZEVs in China? What are the reasons to believe that target setting might make a difference?
It sounds like a question to China, right? It's a lot of questions, but I captured one or two. But anyway, so let me try to take the first step in answering, and maybe Yushi, you can say something in addition. In my mind, I think market has been playing a great role in recent years in driving electric car market, especially in the developed cities, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, but not beyond these cities. If you look at smaller cities, they are still waiting for a lot of policies. And remember, when we talk about policies, not really only mentioning to regulatory framework or the targets, but also incentives for driving electric vehicles, not just mandating the supply or mandating the purchase. But you need to use. You need to have the convenience to use your vehicles, to charge your vehicles. And in those areas, policies will be the key in the future. Lastly, but not the least, heavy commercial vehicles, don't forget about this very important GHG contributor. We are not seeing much progress in electrification for heavy duty vehicles. And this is, as I said in my presentation, so far, the little progress is primarily driven by environmental policies, harsh environmental policies. I believe in the future, at least in the next 5-year plan time frame, the policies will still be crucial for driving electric trucks. Remember, our goal is not to promote the EV industry in China. Of course, that's one of the goals for the Chinese government. Our goal is decarbonization, and these heavy-duty vehicles are extremely important, and the use of zero-emission vehicles are extremely important. And we need policies to cover all these areas. Did I answer it, or yeah? Let me pause here and see if Yunshi, you have any compliments.
Yeah, in answering that particular question, I wouldn't characterize that the United States more command and control than China is. I think it's just a little bit different. If we are talking about California, obviously California has a strong policy, both in commercial vehicles and light-duty vehicles. In China, as we know, that there are strong policies for a long time on light-duty vehicles. For commercial vehicles, China has not adopted a similar ACT rule right yet. We are looking forward to that. So in terms of government mandate, obviously California has strong, clear year-to-year mandate, which China does not have. But China has other government heavy hands, as we can say, in the deployment of ZEVs, which I think is necessary, right? We just said that we need a lot of policies, comprehensive portfolio policies to improve the deployment in heavy-duty trucks and other areas as well.
Okay, thank you both for your perspectives. We have another question. To what extent has China upgraded its local electric distribution system to enable the use of electric vehicle battery storage as a peak load energy source? I saw that Julie was typing a response there. Do you want to come in and kind of recap that for our audience?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for the question. I should say that China has made progress in upgrading certain residential communities to support the increased EV electricity demand from EVs. But the use of EV battery as an energy source has not developed much. And there are a few EV owners use their vehicle for camping outlet usage, but it's not kind of in large scale usage for peak loads. Yeah.
Okay, and we have
Yeah,
another. Oh, sorry.
Okay,
Please
yeah,
go ahead.
there are peak tariff and off-peak tariff in place for the chargers in the neighborhood and at home as well. So I think that sort of regulate a little bit of the peak using and off-peak using. Most cars are charged at home, and most Chinese electricity is produced by coal, so they can't be stopped. So they will be running at night when really there are not many users, industrial users. So right now the charging at home or charging at night seems working quite well. In the long run, obviously there will be issues, but at the moment it's not the issue that government or the private sector is considering.
Okay, we have another question asking about examples of planning agencies that are coordinating on the planning of both transportation sector and zero emission vehicle growth goals with the power sector. So given the increasing number of zero emission vehicles on the road, it may be crucial to coordinate the rapid electrification of transportation with other aspects of the power sector. Does anyone want to come in on that question?
I can give a brief one. As far as I know, the NDRC is responsible for developing or coordinating EV targets and infrastructure and power sector targets. And NDRC actually, when it comes to electric vehicle development plan and also the infrastructure development plan, if you track like the national or the regional provincial plans, it's always coming from a joint group composed of NDRC and the local MIIT, you know, a Ministry of Industry or Ministry of, yeah, it's basically local DRC, the development and DRC, Development and Reform Commission, and the local industry bureaus. That's my quick answer.
Yeah, I want to echo Hui that NDRC is working on it, and they have the authority to coordinate with the other agencies. But we have to remember that NDRC has other tasks at hand. They have to consider national energy security and other issues. So when they develop their long-term power planning, new renewable energy is one thing. The other is that they really have to think about whether the supply will be stable and reliable in terms of some national security emergencies, things like that. So right now, I wouldn't say that coordination with EV is a really high priority. Although adoption of renewable energy is still a big trend and big determination by the government to do that. But remember, there are other issues that NDRC has to consider. That's my point. So that you can see that recently there is a recent trend that there is a more using of coal in China because of the energy independence concern. They don't want to import too much coal from, even cleaner coal from Australia, or too much natural gas. They do import natural gas from Russia right now. But you have to see all these, you know, interplays of the national security issues and adoption of renewable energy.
Hey, thank you. Next, local air pollution conditions in key cities has been a key driver in advancing transportation policy in China. That's less the case here in the US, with perhaps a few exceptions. So what are some of the differences in incentive structures, I think, motivating the decarbonization of the transportation sector in both nations? Like what do you think are the key motives in both countries for undertaking this work?
I recommend the US expert to answer it first. I think the question is more focused on whether the environment is the key driver of electric.
I will take the US. And I also want to connect it to the question on command and control. I think it was a very important question. I believe that we see a global paradigm shift for the first about decade of transportation electrification. The idea was that the policies will push the market, the buyers, and the buyers will push the car companies to make these cars. And even so, the buyers were there, the car companies were not doing this big risky change. Only when we move to more command and control, what they call, or a more direct policies like the ZEV mandate, the NEV mandate, the CO2 regulation in Europe, now the CO2 regulation in the US, that create the supply, we actually see the demand here. So globally and in the US, we are enforcing the supply, same way that we enforce catalytic converters on cars and did not ask people if they want or doesn't want to buy them, but enforce them on cars. I think that that's what's happening. And it's very clear that the main reason for light duty electrification is climate change. All the other factors are secondary. For heavy duty, we also see impact on local emissions around ports and so on. But for light duties, the main motivation in the US is climate change.
Yeah, I can chime in a little. I think California is a great example that its main motive for developing ZEVs, especially in early stage in its beginning in the 90s, or air quality, local air quality. Only adopting ZEVs can help California reduce ozone forming emissions, NOx emissions. That's the beginning of the program, but later on you're encountering multiple issues, climate and other things. And by inventory, you can focus on, as Jill said, a light duty for climate and focus for, on heavy duty for air pollutant as well as greenhouse gas emissions. But anyways, that's my only addition on the US side. I think California is a great example for China. With regard to motives in China, I also think we're seeing a change over the decade. In the first decade of China's EV development, it was really driven by industrial policy. The main goal for developing EVs is to sort of build the world-class, first-rated auto industry in the world. But later on, entering the second decade, the first decade I refer to 2009 to 2019. That's the first milestone. Right now, China is using electric vehicles to resolve multiple issues. This is also similar to California on climate issues to meet its climate target and also to resolve local air quality issues. And at the same time, reserve energy like oil, reserve oil, and also promote the auto industry. It's a combination of multiple goals that weaves the ministries together. Each ministry has their own interest, but EV sort of weaves them together, which is a great thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree, but differ in a slightly way that the beginning of the EV adoption was driven by two main concerns. In addition to the industrial policy, it was also the national energy supply security. China at that time believed that local energy supply would be better than imported oil. Remember, oil import account for 70 to 70% of the China's total oil use at that time, still now. So these are the two major policies. If you look at what's going on right now, a lot of in China, a lot of commentary about China's major exports of autos. Right now, it's number 2 in the world, right? Surpassing Japan last year, and it's a lot of excitement. So this is still a major argument in China as part of the industry policy. Although in the latest years, did add into the local environmental issues, the megacities start to adopt policies in addition to the national policies. So for environmental issues, heavy-duty trucks, you can see in some of the very polluting steel-making cities, they have adopted heavy EVs in heavy-duty trucks as well. So the environmental policies come in as well. I would say CO2 global GHG consideration is still emerging and getting more important, but not as important at the moment as industrial policy and national energy supply still. These are the 2 major issues. And, China is still, as we say, a developing country. So I think that's what they are considering more.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe we will turn to kind of one final question for the group as we're kind of coming toward the end of our time. So this conversation has largely focused on recommendations for both the US and China, in the national context, based on the results of this paper that was produced late last year. But we've also heard a number of examples from the subnational level, both here in California, as well as in Shenzhen and other jurisdictions in China. So I'm curious for any of our panelists who would like to offer any suggestions around opportunities for sharing best practices or information at the subnational level that may be beneficial to both sides. Curious of any examples or suggestions our panelists might have.
Yeah, I think at the subnational level, especially for California, where we all are based, we can really do a lot with China.
I want to add on to Yuanshi's answer on this question is that from my interaction experience of what happens in Shenzhen, I want to make kind of 2 tips which are very helpful and important for city level adoption. One is get people prepared, kind of actually the operation of EVs did change the kind of people in employment a little bit. For example, for the bus transit fleet, the maintenance group, actually, they used to do mechanical engineering things, and then it comes to electric related. So get people kind of trained, and also kind of the infrastructure charging, this kind of supporting system, get things ready, will have the transition process smoother. Another thing is kind of maybe this is specific to China. I'm not sure kind of other jurisdictions how suitable it is. Is give a preference or kind of right of way to EVs. For example, in Shenzhen, for the light duty trucks for urban transit. If like for traditional diesel trucks, they are required to running only in nighttime, but with zero emission vehicles, they can run in the daytime. This road preference is kind of more effective, and kind of the vehicle owners are more welcome to these policies, and incentivize them to use electric vehicles.
I asked something. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, thank you. Actually, I was going to quote you, Jill. I was highly intrigued by your statement of, hey, we also need to develop the rural areas. If we want ever to go to electric, 100% electric, then the rural areas probably will be the last tier. China faced the same problem. So I highly agree with Yuanxi and Shili. These advanced regions like Guangdong, province or Hainan province with certain legislative waiver from the central government could be a great partner for California. I also think that some collaboration in developing ways to electrify the rural area can be an interesting topic between the US and China.
Yeah, I think everyone's idea are great and cover most of what I wanted to say. So I will just say that we usually, the high level people write these really like nice reports on best practices, but you need cities to cities, expert mechanic to talk to each other, to also learn what's not working great, what we would have done different if we have another chance. Transit is a great example. In China, the electric buses have the most experience in the world, and we have a lot of agencies that can learn from each other. Another topic that it's growing, it's end of life of batteries, recycling of batteries, how to handle the batteries in vehicles that have accidents and vehicles that enter. A lot of new frontiers that are being opened both in China and in the US and in California, and we can learn from each other on all levels.
Hey, thank you so much for all of your ideas and perspectives and for your time and expertise. We are coming to the end of our session this evening, but we appreciate your participation and that of our audience. This event has been recorded and will later be available on our website and YouTube channels. And we thank you everyone for participating and wish you a good evening or morning wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.